32 NFL teams looked at the same tape. 32 front offices ran the same measurements, watched the same college film, filled out the same evaluation forms, and 32 teams came to the exact same conclusion about a wide receiver out of Central Michigan named Antonio Brown. Not a starter, not a difference maker, a returner maybe, a depth guy who might stick if the fourth receiver got hurt. Every single one of them was wrong, and they were wrong in a way that should still make personnel departments uncomfortable, because for 6 straight seasons, the man they all passed on was not just good. He was the most productive wide receiver in professional football, not one of the best, the best. Here is the number that should stop you cold. From 2013 through 2018, Antonio Brown caught 686 passes for 9,145 yards. In that same window, Calvin Johnson couldn't touch it. Julio Jones couldn't touch it. Larry Fitzgerald couldn't touch it. Jay Green couldn't touch it. Every one of those men was bigger, most of them were faster. All of them were drafted higher, praised louder, and handed the football sooner. And the smallest man on that list, listed generously at 5'10" and 185 pounds, outproduced every last one of them. Today we are breaking down the most misunderstood dominance run in modern football history, how a 6th-round pick with a small school resume and a scouting report full of red ink became the standard the entire position was measured against, how he did it without a single physical advantage, and why the film, the numbers, and the technique all point to the same uncomfortable conclusion. The league didn't miss on Antonio Brown because they didn't watch him. They missed because they were measuring the wrong things entirely. Let's go back to April of 2010, because you cannot understand the run without understanding the room he walked out of. The Pittsburgh Steelers came into that draft with a plan. First round, they took Marcus Pouncey, a center out of Florida who would go on to make multiple Pro Bowls and anchor their offensive line for a decade. Third round, they took a wide receiver named Emmanuel Sanders out of SMU. Flashy, fast, well-scouted, exactly the kind of receiver you take when you're looking for a receiver. And then the draft kept rolling. Round 4, Round 5, Round 6, pick 195. That's where Antonio Brown was still sitting. And here's the part people forget when they tell this story as a feel-good underdog fable. He wasn't invisible. He had production stacked to the ceiling. He put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons at Central Michigan. He was a first-team All-American as a punt returner. He was named Mid-American Conference Special Teams Player of the Year twice, and he was Freshman of the Year before that. In his final college season, he caught 110 passes. Scouts had the file. They had the tape. They had watched him. The problem was what they saw when they looked. The knock was that he had no true position. Read that again, because it's absurd in hindsight. He was considered too small to survive on the outside, where press corners would maul him at the line. He was considered not explosive enough to thrive in the slot, where separation is everything. And he was obviously, undeniably, not built to win contested catches against safeties who outweighed him by 40 pounds. Small school, small frame, a 40 time that made evaluators shrug instead of sit up. Put all of that in a column, and it adds up to a role player. So the league treated him like one. Look at the receivers taken ahead of him and the picture sharpens. Demaryius Thomas went 22nd overall, and Denver got a real player out of that. Dez Bryant went 24th, and for a stretch, Dallas did too. Golden Tate in the 2nd round, Eric Decker in the 3rd, Brandon LaFell, Jordan Shipley. Sanders himself. Fine, those are defensible picks, but keep scrolling. Marcus Easley came off the board in the 4th round and finished his entire NFL career with 3 receptions, total. Kerry Meyer went in the 5th and was out of the league after essentially 1 season of special teams work. Those aren't just misses. Those are misses that happened while Antonio Brown was still sitting on the board, waiting. By the time Pittsburgh finally called his name with a compensatory pick they'd acquired in a trade with Arizona, he had been passed over more than 190 times. His rookie contract was worth about $1.28 million over 3 years, with a signing bonus of roughly $73,000. That is not a bet. That is a lottery ticket you buy at the gas station because you had spare change in the cup holder, and Antonio Brown never let go of it. Not for a single day of his career. When he picked his jersey number, he chose 84. and when people asked why, he gave an answer that tells you everything about the engine running underneath that man. 8 times 4 is 32. 32 teams looked past him, including the one that eventually took him. He wore the arithmetic of his own rejection across his chest every Sunday for 9 seasons in Pittsburgh. Some players use doubt as fuel, and it burns out by year 3. Brown built a permanent monument to his, and then reported to work. Now, understand the room he walked into. Hines Ward, the franchise's all-time leading receiver, a Super Bowl MVP, was still on the roster. Mike Wallace was becoming one of the most feared deep threats in the sport. Emmanuel Sanders was the shiny rookie who'd gone 3 rounds earlier. And Brown was the 6th rounder who was supposed to catch punts and stay out of the way. For most of his rookie year, that's exactly what happened. He wasn't even active for 7 of Pittsburgh's first 11 games. Think about that. He spent half his rookie season in street clothes. But the very first time he touched a football in a regular season NFL game, he ended the play in the end zone. September 19, 2010, Steelers hosting the Tennessee Titans. Opening kickoff. Meweld Moore fields it and pitches the ball backward on a reverse, to the rookie nobody had heard of. Brown catches it, hits the right sideline, and outruns every single Tennessee player on the field for 89 yards and a touchdown. First play, first touch, first game. He became the first player since Steve Smith in 2001 to take a kickoff to the house in his NFL debut. Every scout who had written questionable speed on his file got a very public answer, and it took about 11 seconds. The rest of the season was quiet. His first career reception came in October against Baltimore, a 6-yard gain, and Ben Roethlisberger didn't even throw it. Charlie Batch did. He finished the year with 16 catches for 167 yards, no offensive touchdowns. But then January came, and something started to show. Divisional round against the Ravens, 3rd and 19, season on the line, and the rookie 6th-round returner runs down the sideline and hauls in a 58-yard bomb, pinning the ball between his helmet and his right hand to set up the winning touchdown. The next week, in the AFC Championship against the Jets, he catches a 14-yard pass late that effectively sends Pittsburgh to the Super Bowl. The Steelers lost that Super Bowl to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, and Brown caught 1 pass for 3 yards in it. But the coaching staff had seen enough. The rookie who couldn't get on the field in October was making the biggest plays of the season in January. That's not luck. That's a player revealing himself. The 2011 season is when the workload started shifting. 16 games, only 3 starts, and he still caught 69 passes for 1,108 yards. 16 yards per catch. That's not a possession receiver number, that's a vertical threat number, from a guy who supposedly couldn't stretch a defense. He returned 27 punts and 24 kickoffs on top of it. He was on the field constantly, doing everything, and his teammates voted him team MVP. He was still the 3rd option. Wallace put up nearly 1,200 yards and 8 scores that year. Ward was still getting his. Sanders was in the rotation. Brown was the guy who made something happen when the ball found him, and the ball simply wasn't finding him enough. Then 2012 arrived, and looked, on paper, like a step in the wrong direction. 13 games, an ankle injury that cost him time, 66 catches for 787 yards and 5 touchdowns. His yards per catch fell to under 12. The explosive plays dried up. Part of that was situational. The offense was in transition. Wallace was unhappy. Roethlisberger missed time. But if you were evaluating Antonio Brown at the end of that season, the honest verdict was this: solid number 2 receiver, excellent returner, useful player, nothing historic. He signed a 5-year extension that offseason, and almost nobody outside Pittsburgh noticed. That contract would become one of the most lopsided bargains of the decade. If this is the kind of breakdown you want more of, the film study, the numbers behind the legend, the stories the highlight shows never take the time to tell, go ahead and join the channel membership right now. Hit that join button underneath this video. It directly keeps this channel running and keeps these deep dives coming. Now, 2013, everything changed at once. Mike Wallace walked in free agency. Hines Ward had retired. And suddenly a Steelers offense built on a franchise quarterback had no established number 1 target. That vacuum had to be filled by somebody, and the somebody was a 25-year-old former 6th-round pick who had been waiting 3 years for exactly this: 110 catches, 1,499 yards, 8 touchdowns, second-team All-Pro, his first Pro Bowl as a wide receiver instead of a returner. Team MVP for the second time. And it wasn't just volume, it was how he was getting it. Watch that season's film, and you notice something that doesn't look normal. Most receivers, when they break off a route, have to decelerate first. They gather, they plant, they push off, and then they accelerate in the new direction. That gathering step is the window a defensive back lives in. It's how corners stay alive. Brown didn't gather, he would put a foot in the ground at full speed and simply be going a different way, like the physics that applied to everyone else on the field had been quietly waived in his case. Corners would flip their hips to run with him, and he'd already be 5 yards into open grass before they got their head back around. Pittsburgh figured out fast that they could line him up anywhere. Outside, slot, motion him across the formation before the snap. It didn't matter, because the thing that made him special wasn't tied to a spot on the field. And that catch radius everyone said he didn't have? At 5'10", he was going up and taking footballs that had no business being caught by anybody under 6'3". Then 2014 happened, and 2015 after that, and the league basically ran out of adjectives. In 2014, he caught 129 passes for 1,698 yards and 13 touchdowns. He led the NFL in both receptions and receiving yards. First-team All-Pro. In 2015, he somehow went further. 136 catches, 1,834 yards, 10 touchdowns. Led the league in receptions again. First-team All-Pro again, and when the Offensive Player of the Year votes were counted, he finished behind Cam Newton, which means one of the greatest receiving seasons of the modern era ended with no hardware on the shelf. 1916 wasn't a decline, it was a redistribution. Le'Veon Bell was healthy, the running game was punishing people, and Brown only put up 106 catches, 1,284 yards, and 12 scores. In 2017, he led the league in receiving yards again with 1,533 on 101 catches and took his fourth consecutive first-team All-Pro selection. There was a stretch that year where he went for 144 yards and 3 touchdowns against Tennessee, then 169 and 2 against Green Bay, then 101 and a score against Cincinnati, then 11 catches for 213 yards against Baltimore. 4 games. That's a season for some receivers. And in 2018, his final year in Pittsburgh, he caught 104 passes for 1,297 yards and 15 touchdowns, leading the entire NFL in receiving scores. 6 seasons. 6 straight years with 100 or more receptions, which at the time was the longest such streak in the history of the sport. 4 consecutive first-team All-Pro nods, 7 Pro Bowls across his career, a place on the NFL's all-decade team for the 2010s. And here's the context that makes it heavier. He did this in the AFC North, in December, in games decided by field position and bad weather, and defenses that were built specifically to punish smaller receivers. He saw press coverage, bracket coverage, safety help rolled to his side, and defensive coordinators who game planned their entire week around taking him away. He produced anyway. Now let's put the competition side by side, because this is where the argument stops being fun and starts being uncomfortable for a lot of people. Julio Jones went 6th overall in 2011, 1 year after Brown fell to the 6th round. Alabama pedigree, freakish size and speed. Anointed before he ever played a snap, and Julio was legitimately an all-time great. From 2014 through 2018, he averaged roughly 100 catches, close to 1,600 yards, and around 6 touchdowns per season, including a historic 1,871-yard year in 2015. Brown still outproduced him. More receptions, more touchdowns, more year-over-year consistency. And Julio was catching passes from an MVP-winning quarterback in Matt Ryan during that window. Calvin Johnson is the physical outlier of the entire position, 6'5" with sprinter speed. His peak overlapped with Brown's for 3 seasons, 2013 through 2015, before he retired. Over those 3 years, Megatron averaged in the neighborhood of 72 catches, 1,100 yards, and 7 scores. Brown, in the same 3 years, averaged around 125 catches, 1,677 yards, and 10 touchdowns. That's not a gap, that's a different tax bracket. Larry Fitzgerald was in his 30s by then, so it isn't a clean comparison, but he was still averaging roughly 90 catches and 1,000 yards a season. Hall of Fame production, nowhere near Brown's. J. Green was probably the closest thing to a fair fight, averaging about 78 catches, 1,100 yards, and 7 touchdowns as the unquestioned focal point of a competitive Cincinnati offense. Good. Very good. Not this. Every single one of those men had a physical edge on Antonio Brown. Taller, heavier, longer arms, bigger hands, better draft capital, and better coaching investment from day one. He was the smallest player in that group by a meaningful margin, and he beat all of them over the same 6-year stretch. And then there's the comparison that people get mad about. Jerry Rice's best 6-year run, 1986 through 1991, averaged out to roughly 91 catches, 1,479 yards, and 14 touchdowns per season. Brown's 6-year run averaged about 114 catches, 1,524 yards, and 11 touchdowns per year. The volume is higher. The touchdown rate is lower. Nobody is saying Antonio Brown is Jerry Rice, and that isn't the point. The point is that the sentence can be spoken out loud without it being ridiculous. That alone tells you the altitude he reached. So how? How does a man with none of the tools dominate a league obsessed with tools? 3 things, and he mastered all 3 to a level almost nobody has matched. First, the release. Getting off the line of scrimmage was Brown's superpower, and it wasn't close. A press corner's entire job is to get hands on a receiver in the first yard and disrupt the timing of the play. Brown made that job nearly impossible. He'd give a hard jab step, sell a shoulder, and be past the corner's outside hip before the defender's hands were even up. It was a quick jab, a shoulder fake, a half beat of hesitation from the man across from him, and that was the whole game. He didn't need to overpower press coverage because he never let it happen in the first place. Second, the route running. There's a phrase people throw around. He ran routes like a point guard, and with Brown it's actually accurate. He understood coverage the way a floor general understands a defense. He knew where the soft spot in a zone would open before it opened. He knew when a corner had committed his weight and could no longer recover. He'd sell one direction with his eyes, his shoulders, and his hips, then break the opposite way at full speed. The sharpness of those breaks is what separated him from every other undersized receiver in league history. Being quick is common. Being quick without ever losing your balance or your speed through a cut is not. Third, the hands. He caught everything. The easy ones, sure, but also the ball thrown behind him, the ball high over his head, the ball low and away at his shoe tops, the ball thrown into a window so tight that the safety was already arriving. And critically, he caught the ball in stride without breaking rhythm, which turned routine completions into disasters for the defense. He wasn't going to bulldoze linebackers the way Calvin Johnson could. He didn't need to. He made people miss in open space, and he had more than enough speed to turn a 10-yard slant into a 60-yard touchdown before the safety could take an angle. Underneath all 3 of those was the part you can't chart. He was in the building when nobody asked him to be, running extra routes after practice ended, studying leverage, building a body that could take 130 targets a year at 185 pounds. While other late-round rookies were grateful just to be employed, Brown was operating on the assumption that he'd be the best receiver in the sport, and then behaving accordingly for a decade. Now, we have to talk about the other half of this, because pretending it doesn't exist would be dishonest. After 2018, it came apart. The trade demand, the exit from Pittsburgh, the Oakland situation that ended before it started, the helmet standoff, the cryotherapy incident, the brief stop in New England and how quickly it ended, serious allegations, legal filings, police involvement, and the kind of headlines that follow a name forever, and then a walk-off in the middle of a game in Tampa that became one of the strangest images in the history of the sport. He won a Super Bowl ring with the Buccaneers along the way, which somehow feels like a footnote in his own story. The Hall of Fame conversation around Antonio Brown is genuinely complicated, and anybody telling you it's simple has picked a side already. The on-field case is airtight. 928 receptions, 12,291 receiving yards, 83 receiving touchdowns, 7 Pro Bowls, 4 first-team All-Pro selections, an All-Decade team spot, and a 6-year run of consistency the position had never seen. Voters, though, weigh the whole picture, And the whole picture includes everything that came after. But the way it ended is not what this story is about, and it doesn't retroactively erase what happened between 2013 and 2018. Because for 6 years, a man that every organization in football measured and dismissed was the best wide receiver alive. He was passed over 194 times. He was labeled too small for the outside, too slow for the slot, too light for contested catches, too small school to trust. He wore the math of that rejection on his jersey and then went out and put up numbers that beat every physically gifted receiver of his generation and stood up next to the greatest to ever play the position without looking out of place. The scouting reports weren't lazy. They were thorough, professional, and completely wrong, because they were measuring a body when the thing that made him unstoppable was never in his body at all. If you want more deep dives into the careers that made the scouting reports look foolish, subscribe to the channel. There you have it. So what do you think? Is Antonio Brown a first-ballot Hall of Famer based purely on what happened between the lines, or does the rest of it keep him waiting at the door? Drop your take in the comments, because I already know that one's going to get heated. Hit the like button if this gave you a new appreciation for what that 6-year run actually was, and subscribe if you're new, because this is where we break down the stories behind the stats. We'll see you in the next one.